I attended kind of an interesting event last week. It was a fundraiser for the jail ministry for Montcalm County, where I was jailed. I didn't attend as a guest. I didn't choose to attend. I was asked to come there to work by the couple who runs the ministry. And but I think if I had been invited, I probably would have said yes. But I always see a difference between when someone has ordered me to do work and when I attend something as a guest. And sometimes it just changes what I feel like should be expected of me and what I expect of others. But it was a chili cook-off, which was great because I like chili. But it was interesting because the jail was heavily represented, the undersheriff and jail administrator. So it was really emphasizing the ministry's perspective of the jail as a positive place, which I don't really share. Today, I went to my doctor last week. I am 5'8", and I am today about 150 pounds. I went to my doctor last week, and I was weighed twice, and I was about 149 pounds. I think I'm pretty thin. I do a lot of yoga, so I'm pretty muscular. But I just mentioned that weight because when I was held in Montcalm County Jail, I was denied food, and I lost 30 pounds. So I was 119 pounds when I was transferred to a hospital from Montcalm County Jail. That is one reason I don't have a positive opinion of the jail, because the whole time I was complaining about not being fed enough food. So I just don't love Montcalm County Jail. And and in terms of inmate health, it's a jail with about 200 beds, 205, I think. But despite being so small, just through word of mouth, I knew of 3 inmates dying in the last couple of years. One, I knew a friend of hers. She had bleeding ulcers, and she was laying in her bed screaming and bleeding out and asking to go to the hospital, and she was not transferred to the hospital, and she died. Another man hanged himself with a bed sheet, so that was confirmed because we were no longer allowed to have sheets. We just have blankets. And a third, I think, OD'd or died. I was the only person I knew there who was not a drug addict. I've never used hard drugs, never used IV drugs. I've never even been in a room with someone using methamphetamine, but that is not normal. Everyone else I've met was a drug user. So most people, when they get to jail, even most of them are charged for other things, but they detox because they're also high. So they spend a few days in the booking area so that the untrained jailers can watch them. They're not medical professionals. They probably shouldn't be detoxing there, but that's rural justice. So one man died there. So I don't value Montcalm County Jail's leadership in the community, and I wouldn't have, if I'd known it was partly to celebrate them, I would not have participated in that celebration. And also, this one was really funny. The woman who represented me, Lori Shearer, against whom I currently have an active ethics grievance, she was there. She's the reason I was in jail for 7 months instead of released after a couple days with a misdemeanor charge. I've already talked about my case, but I'll give another example of an inmate Lori Shearer screwed over. My girl Bonnie. Bonnie was my best friend at Montcalm County Jail, and she was, I think she's like a year or two older than me. So we had a lot of the same cultural reference points. She had an understanding of civil rights and what was bullshit and what wasn't, that the younger women didn't have. And we just had the same habits. We like to get up early, clean our cell, and watch true crime together. So we were best friends. But Lori, I met a number of women in jail who were doing time for other people they loved. Usually men, but sometimes when you have a daughter or a son, you will be willing to take a charge for them because you know with their record, they might do more time. I'm just going to say that. So Bonnie was presented by the prosecutor with a plea agreement.
Bonnie wanted to take that plea agreement. Lori Shearer did not let her take that agreement. And I have my own experience with her. I don't have a lot of hard feelings against Lori Shearer, notwithstanding tort. That's not my business. I'm just a lay person. But I don't like to hold on to grievances, and I'm not an emotionally reactive person. I don't think she was part of a big cabal. I think she was a stupid bitch. My mom manipulated her, and she was confronted with a situation she didn't understand. And so, I forgive her for being a stupid bitch. And it's so weird. Evangelical Christians really hate cuss words. And I don't understand, because I know there's Leviticus, we're not supposed to blaspheme. I get that if you're a fundamentalist. I'm not, but I get that. But bitch is a female dog. And if the Lord didn't want me to comment on stupid bitches, why would the Lord make so many stupid bitches? I really don't get it. I don't say it around children, but you too, after a stupid bitch has incarcerated you for 7 months, yeah, you can mention on YouTube her affinity to feminine canines, in my opinion. So I saw Lori there. That was fun. And I think what's hard at situations like this is I don't feel like when I'm not attending something freely, when I haven't professed things, I haven't testified about this ministry moving in any way in my life. I've never made that claim. I can understand how it would be beneficial to people fundraising if I did have a claim about this ministry that I encountered in the jail, but I didn't. So it's not fair to expect me to say untrue things. But then it's like, so I feel like I'm working because I'm told to volunteer. But then I'm introduced to like an administrator for this ministry. And then, the pastor's wife, she's like, just like says my name, and I wouldn't have said anything further. But she wanted to mention the fact that I was an inmate, which is fine. But then that implies that I'm there willingly, which I didn't love, because she said, that I was in Montgomery County Jail, and then there was a pause because I was like, yes. And then she's like, but she's a good girl. And I'm like, of course I'm a good girl. I'm a child of God. That's not in question. So, and I just clarified, I said, yes, I'm living at the parsonage and I do work, and they asked me to come here tonight. That's the truth. But what bothers me about being treated like the parish pet and not being invited is and this is like a real like Christian kind of beef. Nobody at this church has ever, including the pastor, have ever asked me if I'm baptized, which is crazy, because Baptists are supposed to ask you about baptism. And so I guess they just assume I haven't been baptized, or they just assume that there's no way that I could have been baptized by a real born again preacher. So that that just makes me even more reluctant to talk about my faith experience when I'm ordered to attend meetings with them. So, because I do have a very powerful and personal conversion and baptism experience before I met these people. And if you can only see me as a blank slate to write your story on, it's hard because I've lived many years and I have my own faith formed. So that's the conflict, and that's why my conscience tells me to move on. I feel really ungrateful listening to myself, because I have been given a lot of charity, but I like to be able to freely express my opinions and gratitude, and that's been one of the challenges. I've been thinking about it a lot. When I was drawn to working with young children very early in my career, I was working in an infant room, a really good one. And but as I got into the field of early childhood education, which is a lot about developmental psychology, but it's also about organizational psychology. And because you have to get kids to do what you want to do, and it's hard. And people discover that and I've worked in really good schools, and they look so beautiful and harmonious, and kids are running around. I mean, at Bank Street, I had 3-year-olds sawing wood. I've worked in jobs where I've taken 6 kids on subway trains, like 4-year-olds. Like, so in New York, you have there's like a high value of giving kids like controlled risk and organized confusion, but that takes a lot of planning for the progressive teachers at those schools. And those are the best schools, are the ones with the saws. And so I understand how to plan, and and then it can be really hard because you want to just scream at kids and have them do what you want. And that's sort of the nature of controlling institutions like fundamentalist religions and people who are drawn to being very controlling, or even partners I've had who are abusive. It's you're drawn to like something like lovely and joyful in somebody, and you want the lovely, joyful parts, but you don't want their opinions. You don't want their thoughts. You don't want their free movement of their body. You want them to be where you want them to be. You want them to say what you want them to say, but then you still want this essence, and it's like people are surprised when you commit vivisection on something that it dies, that it's not as joyful as when you try to control them. And I don't know, I tried so hard to gently, and this is by no means all the people who are in my life right now. I have many people who've been very respectful and loving, but other times, it's very clear that I'm not supposed to dissent. I'm supposed to be submissive. And I'm like, okay, that's my job because I get free housing, so I will be submissive. But, it's not just, the deacons don't do that. The deacons who let me stay here. But other people, which is strange because the deacons are the only ones who should do that, kind of. But, so, there's a couple, but they're kind, and I know that they're confusing, but I'll give an example. I know the conversation that takes place in Bible study because I haven't joined this church, but I know what Bible studies are like for certain very enmeshed Christians. They're very heavily in each other's business in a way that I don't seek out. I mostly am content to go quietly in my room and pray to my Father who alone can hear me. I don't need to always be loudly in the street or in the synagogue like the hypocrites. That's just me. But and usually my prayers, because my life has been so overwhelming, are, please God, guide me to knowing what I want. There's not like, and I tell this to people, there's no like way to like just put a hat on the snowman, but they want that. They want to think, oh, she needs a job. She needs to stop using crack. Whatever. They want to have a hat on the snowman. They want to help. And I wish I could give that to them too. I would love to have my life fixed. But I've learned to not look at my life as a problem to fix. It's an experience. I don't know why it's this bad, but I just have to get through it. And managing other people is sometimes part of it. But so with this couple, so they go to Bible study and they're like, oh, I'm sure they have some idea, which is probably not true. Like I said, I've been dealing with an agonizing situation for 5 years. So I have a lot of strategies and coping mechanisms. I have pain in my life. And it doesn't mean that I need to talk to somebody about it just because they're curious about the gossip. Because I know the gossip already. I am not curious. And sometimes I need to talk about things, and sometimes I just need to cry or pray or sing or do yoga. I'm a grown ass woman. But I understand, like, they sit in a prayer group and they're like, oh, we just need to love on her. She thinks she doesn't deserve it. So we're not even going to give her a choice. We're going to just take her out. And no, I don't like to be kidnapped. So like this couple, it's after dark because it's winter. They come knocking on my door after prayer meeting. They're like, we're going to take you out to dinner. Nope. If you wanted to, please, let's just arrange a time. Just, call me and we'll find a time tomorrow. Next week. I gave an example of how we pick days and times and agree in advance. And I don't know why. Well, actually, I do know why. So I've repeated it to I've had these Christians try to jump scare me again. And I'm like, I don't want you to put me in your car. I want you to let me meet you somewhere. And I like to know that I'm meeting you before it happens. This is how I make plans with my friends. It's the only way I've ever done it. And they won't ever make plans with me. They like to surprise me. And then I was like, oh, they think I'm a junkie, so they want to figure out which drugs I'm using. And I'm not using drugs, so maybe 5 times they'll show up and see I'm not using drugs. And so then the same couple, and this is what's confusing. They were calling me and they wouldn't leave a message. The wife called and she didn't leave a message. I was going to call her back. And then her husband showed up at my door, which is weird. I don't want her husband at my door. And he's like, we're taking you out on your birthday. I was like, could we please find another time? No, we're taking you out on your birthday at 9. And so I went, and he's like, we'll pick you up. And I said, no, I'll meet you. He's like, why? And I said, I want to drive. I'll meet you. It's weird. I just want to know where I'm going. I want to have my car. And so he let me drive. And then I showed up, and then they said, we thought it would be good to have breakfast with you because we know with your diet it's strange. And like, what am I supposed to say? I don't eat breakfast. I do intermittent fasting. I don't eat until 11. But they didn't give me a choice. If they had asked me to meet them, I would have told them. If they were my friends, they might have known that. But then they said, we want to be your friends. I said, thank you. But again, if you were my friend, you would let me freely meet you somewhere. And it's confusing because if you want me to be submissive and obey commands, you should not be surprised when I'm not effusive with friendship. And I try not to be like a punitive bitch because I'm a charity case. I am like the parish pet. But I just wish we could just have a rule. Like, you can sign out the pet and she'll be a good pet when you take her out. But at least I know when I have to be a pet. And we don't pretend that I'm using my free will. Okay, this is a little catty. It's American Baptist catty, I guess. Here's the thing. I am somebody who is very respectful of whatever situation I'm in. If you go to the Vatican, you have to keep your knees and your shoulders covered. You might get kicked out. I saw it happen to girls from my high school. And if you go to a mosque, there's different rules. Baptist church, different rules. But it depends. So I was a member of an American Baptist church where women could be deacons. This church, which is true of most Southern Baptist church, only men are deacons, which, it's just it's an approach to the world, and that's the church's values, and I'm not arguing with that. But what bothers me, and this is like,
I feel like MAGA tries to do this in general. So I'm in the lobby, and this is about this couple. An example. So I saw my friend, a Christian sister, and I gave her a hug. And this man saw me give her a hug, and he said, "Hey, what about my hug?" And since I'm a progressive, I was back on my heel, like, oh, men and women equal. Of course, he should get a hug. But then I had a moment to pause, and I'm like, this is a church where men and women are not the same, where sisters are sisters, brothers are brothers, single women are single women, married men are married men. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to start shaking hands with these men because they all seem to like to hug me, and whether I want to or not. And I realized, as a Christian woman, I think it's okay to pass the peace through the handshake. And my juicy, woke, squishy, bisexual titties are not for hugging unless you're my man. And I think that's reasonable. But I don't, it wasn't received that way at church. I didn't use the language. I had ceded ground on 2 hugs, and I just took the hugs back and went back to a handshake, and there was resistance, but I realized that I don't have to argue that. So, except on the internet to random people, and the 6s of you hopefully aren't offended.
I'm sorry to gossip. But since I voiced my concern previously, I mean, I'm still concerned, but I have a friend who has offered me a place to stay at his house, so I feel like I have emergency accommodations, which makes me feel a little less vulnerable. It was so strange seeing the jailer and the pastor and the attorney who locked me up, these different forces that have had control over my life. And it was strange to see them converge at the fundraiser. I'm not a slave. I'm not. I sound very ungrateful. Very little is expected of me, and I'm safe. It's hard because emotionally, but I feel like it's not safe for me to be isolated. And I'm calculating that, sometimes when I say things, it might be taken the wrong way, and maybe I'll end up sleeping in my car, which it's my car in the way that possession of anything is 9/10 of the law. So you can understand why. Well, it's not the ideal place for me to be sleeping. I've been in situations like my marriage that pull on you and start to feel closer. And I know that if you don't start looking for a way out, and that starts to feel close, sometimes it gets harder. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not a slave. But I feel like sociologically, it's interesting when you think about what happens in rural areas and you take away all services, all civil rights attorneys, all advocates, and you leave impoverished women alone. How easy it would be to enslave them if we didn't live in such a vibrant, robust democracy. Before my friend offered me a place to stay, like, the pastor was suggesting that I could help clear raspberry bushes and mow the lawn. And when I volunteer, I like to choose to volunteer. That's what I really like. So it's just good to
But I think it's hard. I can imagine how when women are dealing with mental health issues or addicted or impoverished and not willing to risk further poverty, that, a bad actor might take advantage of them and maybe get them to do things that they wouldn't do if there were social services to help them. But thankfully, we live in a really healthy democracy, so we don't have to worry about that.